Hey, it's Jim, and this is level 3 of the CFA program, a constructed response set on the topic of performance measurement. We'll take a look at the first 2 learning modules inside of this topic. We'll do some return stuff, and then we'll do some manager selection stuff. Let's go ahead and read through the case. Here we have EdgeWorth Capital, mid-sized asset management firm, balanced portfolios for high net worth individuals. Sounds like you and me, right? We're both high net worth individuals. There's a chuckle in the back of my brain there. We've got Sarah, manager of the flagship product, EdgeWorth Balanced Fund. She's conducting comprehensive performance analysis to understand the sources of performance. So here we have in just one of those 4 lines, probably a little bit fewer lines than you'll get on the actual exam, but this sets up the problem, and clearly there are a series of questions going back to Learning Module 1 and Learning Module 2. All right, the Institute loves to give you tables, so there's our fixed income portfolio. We've got a total return and the income return. Boy, we may have to use those in some kind of a calculation. Duration at the beginning of the year. Now, we're not really told anything about investment horizon or goals of this fixed income portfolio. We may or may not have to use duration. But yield to maturity beginning, yield to maturity ending. So yields were 2.5 and then 3.2 by the end of the year. So what we get out of this orange box is that total return is minus, income return is plus, and then interest rates have gone up during the course of the year, so that probably means something. Here's the equity portfolio. Notice we're given portfolio weights and portfolio returns, and then benchmark weights and then benchmark returns. So we're probably going to have to do some kind of subtracting of the 2 weights and subtracting of the 2 types of returns to get to some attribution analysis. That table leads us to think that's going to be a question. All right, here's 2 potential managers, A and B. There's alpha. There's the information ratio. There's the p-value. So clearly, manager A looks to be superior, at least upon an initial glance. Then we've got some other funds here. EdgeWorth Value, EdgeWorth Growth, EdgeWorth Core. We're given returns. We're given that minimum acceptable return, and then the Sortino ratio. So we probably have to do something with that. Sure enough, let's go ahead and look at these questions here. Number 1, calculate the price return of the fixed income portfolio. So let's go ahead and do that one here. So we know that total return is equal to the income return plus the price return. So really all we're going to do is rearrange that equation. There you go. That's a super simple math. So we get that percentage price return as a minus 6%, but we're not surprised, right? We shouldn't be surprised. Whoops, let's go back here. If yields go up, right, they were 2.5, then they were 3.2. So the price of these fixed income securities had to go down. And so what did we find out in, what was that answer? They fell by 6%. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Question 2. Here we go. Decompose equity portfolio. This is the attribution analysis under the BHB model. Show your calculations and interpret the results. So this will probably take us a little bit of time. So notice that we have shown the table again. The first step is to figure out what the return on the portfolio is. So we're just going to take 70% times the 10 and 30% times the 3. Can you see that in those 2 columns, column 2 and column 4? So that gets us our portfolio return, 7.9, and then the benchmark return, we just we just shift the math over, and we do 60% of 8, 40% of 6, so that gets us 7.2. All right, so let's calculate that active return or that excess return. It's just the difference between 7.9 and 7.2, so that's 0.7%. So let me just remind you that BHB model, it is going to decompress. I'm not sure that's the right word. It's going to decompose. That's probably the right word. There's probably other D words in there that you could use. But this is the attribution analysis. So the question is going to be, did this fund outperform its benchmark because it was just lucky, or was it because it had superior allocation decisions or superior asset selection decisions? And so that's what this BHB model does. So let's go ahead and attack those first two. So step 4, it doesn't matter whether you do step 4 or step 5 in that particular order. So let's do the asset allocation effect. So what this means, we're going to ask ourselves the question, how did we deviate from the benchmark weights? So let's go up to sector X. Benchmark tells us 60, but we did 70. Oh, all right. So we overweighted in sector X, but then we underweighted in sector Y. So what impact did that have on the return of the portfolio? So all we're going to do, and this is what I said earlier, we're going to take the difference between some of these columns. So all we're going to do is take the difference between what we picked and what the benchmark offered us. So 70 minus 60 times our benchmark return, and then the 30 minus the 40. So that's going to be a minus number in there, right? So that's times the 6%. And that gets us, well, if you do the math, it gets 0.2%. So how do we interpret that? Well, our asset selection effect, let's go back here. What did we do? We outperformed by 7. Here, we're attributing 2 out of that 7 to the asset allocation effect. Then we'll go ahead and ask the question, how about the securities inside of this? In this case, it's just sector X and sector Y. So we're going to do exactly what we did in step 4, but we're just going to shift it over a column. Instead of taking the difference in the weights, we're going to take the difference in the returns. So that's the 10 minus the 8. And we're going to multiply that by the benchmark weight. And then we're going to take the 3 minus 6, which is negative, multiply that by the benchmark weight. And that turns out to be 0, right? So what can we say? That was a wash, right? Our security selection did us no good. So then we need to ask ourselves the question, well, these two things, they interact, asset selection and asset allocation, they interact. It's kind of like a compounding effect, but we don't do the compounding that we did all the way back in level 1. All we're going to do is we're going to combine what we did in those previous 2 steps into some interaction effect. So we're going to take the difference between the weights. So look at the first one, 70 minus 60, right, times the 10 minus 8, and then the 30 minus 40. So if you do all that, you get the 0.5. Now we're getting somewhere. So what was our outperformance? It was 7. So how do we get the 7? 2 for asset allocation, 0 for security selection, and 5 for the interaction effect. So let's make sure that we complete the answer. We did the math, so show our calculations. So let's go ahead and interpret, which I just did, going through those slides. And so there we go. The decision to overweight sector X paid off. Nothing really happened. I would put down that... I would put down security selection. My answer, I always like to give crazy answers. I would say something like, hey, marginal cost equals marginal benefit of security selection. Don't put that down there. But these are the kind of academic things that pop into my brain. Just say, you know what, nothing was helpful or hurtful from that security selection. But then the interaction, the fact that these two things compound, and we don't put the word compound in here as part of our interpretation or justification. And so there we go. So 2 plus 0 plus 5 gives me 7. All right, so let's go back to question 3. Identify which type of error, 1 or 2. Remember, the only choices are 1 or 2. If Sarah decides to hire manager A, so what do? When we first looked at that table, we pretty much liked manager A. All right, so which type of error is more likely to occur, and then justify your response. All right, so let's work through that particular table. We know that at the 95% confidence level that, the corresponding test statistic, when we did all that kind of stuff with hypothesis testing, and then we summarize that with a p-value, that's 0.05. So manager A has a p-value of 0.03, which means they're statistically significant in terms of the computation of that alpha. So let's go ahead and identify the null hypothesis. What was the null hypothesis? That would be something like, hey, manager A is equal to manager B. So because of those p-values, we reject the null and we hire manager A, but manager A stinks, right? So there's subsequent underperformance. So this would be a type 1 error. Question 4, how about the fund with the highest? So remember we had those 3 extra funds in there. What were they called? Core or something. So let's go ahead and do that where am I? All right, so here's that table. There's the value, growth, and core. So Sortino, 9, 85, and 87. So here's the Sortino ratio formula, which I'm certain that you guys have remembered a million times in your life. Average portfolio return minus that minimum return divided by the target semi-deviation. So we just rearrange all of that stuff. And so there you go. You can do the math quickly to solve for the target semi-deviation. So EdgeWorth has the highest of the 3 target semi-deviations. And that, my friends, takes us through this essay. This was a lot of fun. If you want more fun, go to those 2 learning modules. I think the first one has about 13 or 14 questions, which they're pretty straightforward. The second learning module, I think it has 627. Probably not that many. I think there's 42 or 43 in there. So really, if you go do those, 55 questions, you'll be on top of everything inside of these 2 learning modules. So hey, thanks for watching. Have a great day and good luck studying.